places, and to be able to pull that off, so it needs to be a group effort, and I appreciate your help with that. And if you had a chance to peek at Brad's website, I'm sure that's part of why you're here. This beautiful work, and he's so Brad, where are you located physically?
I live in Chisago City.
So not far away.
No.
And I learned he has more talents than photography. You can tell him a little bit more about some of the other things you do. So without further ado, this is Brad Madison, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right. So again, just as he said, my name is Brad Madison. I was actually born and raised in Chisago City, Minnesota. I only moved back here about 10 years ago. I like to tell people in my past life, before I was a photographer, I actually was a Broadway performer. So I worked in Broadway shows in New York City, as well as London and other places in Europe. I actually met my wife in Germany, who's also a retired Broadway performer. And around 10 years ago, we moved back to Minnesota. Basically because we had children and we wanted to provide for them a better quality of life. I didn't want them to be raised in New York City. I thought it was only fair that my son has the ability to sit at the end of a dock and fish for sunfish just like I did growing up, rather than worry about getting run over by a car in New York City. So that brought me back. And with that change in location also came a change in careers, because I couldn't survive on an actor's salary here in Minnesota. And one of the things that I was really passionate about growing up was always taking pictures. I used to take pictures on, I remember my very first camera was a Nikon N70, I think. It was a film camera. And that's kind of how I learned to take photos. And when I moved back to Minnesota is when I sort of made it my profession. And I slowly but surely turned it into a full-time career, and that's all I do now. My wife and I, it's all we do is photography. Contrary to some people's belief, you can make a living doing photography. I had a father of a bride at a wedding several months ago ask me, "So what do you do for a real job?" And it took everything in me to bite my tongue and to not reply back in a snarky way, but instead I just replied to him, this is all I do, this is my profession, and it's a full-time job. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. I'm going to be talking about portrait photography, and as it turns out, portrait photography is sort of what I specialize in. This next slide here, oh, forgive me, by the way, this is the first time I've ever done one of these, so if there's any information that you guys don't really find relevant to you, hopefully something in here is going to be relevant to you. My biggest fear is that I bore you. I'm really passionate about technical aspects of photography, and I love talking about technical aspects, but again, I don't want to bore you with technical aspects. Feel free, I don't know how you guys normally do these, but feel free to jump in and just shout out questions in the middle. I don't feel like we need to save all the questions till the end. If something comes up and you want to ask me, feel free. That's kind of how I roll. I'm sort of just, I like to wing it. But anyway, these are a few of the different styles of portrait photography. I wouldn't say that this is a complete list. I just made this up. So there's probably some that are on here that aren't on this list. Engagement, wedding, family, lifestyle, seniors, maternity and kids, headshot photography. I don't have to read them all. You can sort of read them. Some of the most popular ones are on the left here, and in fact, that's where I live. These are sort of the styles of portrait photographer that I specialize in, my wife and I together. So I would say a large majority, I would say our bread and butter, as it were, for my wife and I, are engagement and weddings. Also a lot of families. Obviously a lot of these things sort of go with the seasons, right? So in the summer, I'm taking a lot of wedding photos. I'm not doing so many weddings in the winter, but in the winter I might be doing more family and lifestyle shoots, or and also engagement shoots. A lot of people, I'll show some examples. You can take beautiful photos here in Minnesota in the snow, so you shouldn't be restricted by the seasons, but anyway, these are the ones that I'm going to talk about mostly today. I'm going to start off with talking about engagement sessions, and I'm going to sort of just basically, the way I've sort of constructed this this TED Talk is I want to talk about basically all 5 of these different styles and how to be successful in each one. Again, I'm sure that some of them will be applicable to you and others won't, but I think you should still be able to garner some information from even certain styles of portrait photography that you aren't interested in doing. Actually, when Shirley spoke to me about doing this, she mentioned that a lot of you are really into landscape photography and that sort of thing, and don't particularly, or particularly don't shoot a lot of portrait photography, but would love to, but kind of just don't know how to approach that. So that's my overall goal here, is to sort of give you the confidence to be able to get out and shoot people. And with that said, on the top there says capturing people in their natural state. That's really what portrait photography is shooting people rather than flowers or bugs or landscapes or buildings. So anyway, engagement sessions can be one of the most challenging types of portrait sessions due to your subject's comfort level in front of the camera and by how naturally photogenic the couple is. So you're going to find when shooting any sort of portrait session, some people are just naturally more comfortable having their picture taken, or just more naturally photogenic. By photogenic, it's important that I say photogenic doesn't mean good looking, right? It means just comfortable and natural in front of the camera. Good looking, photogenic people can be small, big, anywhere in between, and any sort of visual appearance. Some of my most beautiful and amazing engagement photos aren't of skinny models. They're of people that are just truly in love, that are sharing emotions together, and I'm capturing those moments. And you're going to find that sometimes when you have a subject who's not particularly photogenic or not particularly comfortable in front of a camera, you might have to work a little harder with those people. I actually use this thought as an analogy with teachers, right? Because I have a son who has ADHD, and teachers sometimes really have to work harder to get him to focus in class. There's kids that sit there and they study and they're super easy, they do all their homework and they pay attention to class. And there's kids that you have to work a little bit harder. So just like with my clients, some clients are super photogenic and easy to work with, and some I gotta manipulate a little bit and get them to focus, as it were. Some keys to success with engagement photography, and the very first thing I'm going to talk about is making a connection with your clients, with the couple. And you'll find that this is a theme that sort of persists through all of portrait photography, especially for me. Connecting with your clients. By connecting with your clients, that means, some of the ways that we can connect with people is by finding interests and finding things that you can share that are interesting. With guys, I'll talk about, are you a Minnesota Vikings fan? Oh, what do you think of Kirk Cousins? What do you think our record's going to be? And I start to build some rapport with them. Finding out, especially with couples, I love to find out about how they met. I love to find out, tell me the story of how you proposed. How long have you been together? How long have you been engaged? Where did you guys go to school? That sort of thing. And that's sort of actually the cornerstone of how my wife and I sort of built our business as a whole, is built around building connections with our clients. In fact, I actually do the DJ and MC at a wedding when I'm working a wedding, so that I can provide an even more intimate experience. I know that sounds crazy, but it just allows me to sort of give them a full service white glove experience. So yes, building a connection with your clients is very important. When you're actually taking the photos, you'll want to give them a lot of encouragement and sharing of the photos. And then I wrote chimping. Does everybody know what chimping is? Or does anybody know what chimping is? Yes? Okay. Chimping, I'll explain it, is when you take your camera and you take a picture of your clients, and you take a couple pictures, and then you look at the back and you go, ooh, 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 oh my gosh, look at this picture. and you show them the picture, and they see it on the back, and it will immediately instill a bit of confidence in them, because they'll feel awkward at first, and they'll you know, oh, I'm not any good at taking pictures. We're not very photogenic. Everybody thinks the same thing. You'll hear the same thing from every person that you take pictures of. So it's important that you show them that they are. And with that said as well, one of the things I always tell people is nobody's good at taking pictures. Who has a camera pointed at them for an hour and a half, unless you're like a model, right? So it's not a normal thing that most people deal with in a normal situation. So giving them lots of encouragement and sharing the pictures on the back of the camera is going to get them to feel a lot more comfortable. We're going to use prompts, and I have what I call my go-tos. And by prompts, I mean, there's certain things that you could have couples do. And again, it doesn't have to be couples. You can have prompts for family photos too. But for instance, I'll have a guy, like say I've set up a shot where I'll have the couple facing each other, but I'll have the girl sort of facing the camera and the guy put his nose on the temple of the girl. And I'll have him, I say, okay, spell a word with your nose on her temple. And then I have her guess what he wrote. It's funny, just like you guys laugh. They laugh while they're doing it and they try and figure it out. Or I ask them what their favorite song is. I'll have them stare into each other's eyes. What's your favorite song? All right, sing your favorite song in a Michael Jackson voice or whatever. And I just have them do silly things. There's all kinds of different things you can do. There's websites that you can go to find prompts to give clients if you can't think of any on your own. There's even apps. I have an app. I don't use it anymore. I forget what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But there's an app that you can use, and it literally will give you prompts. And you just look randomly at the prompts to give a couple, and it's hilarious. One of my go-tos is I have the couple get close together like they're just about to kiss. But I tell them, you're not allowed to kiss until I actually tell you to kiss. So I get them really close, closer. And then I tell the guy, all right, now make a monkey sound or something while they're that close. And they start to laugh, and there's like, you know, that moment where they're about to kiss and they're laughing. It's always an amazing picture. Encourage talking to each other. And make engagement photos a date night. That's what I try and I set this up beforehand. I tell the couple, come tonight, have a couple, you know, have a drink or two if you want beforehand, loosen yourselves up. Think of it as a date night. You're out and about and you're dressed up nice. Plan dinner for later. I encourage them to talk to each other and spend that moment together as if it's a date. I do have a couple examples of some photos here of engagement sessions. This actually is a fun note about this session wasn't meant to happen. We met at their location and it started to rain and we were gonna cancel the session and reschedule. But I just was like, you guys wanna go, there was a boat launch. This is actually a boat launch. Do you wanna jump out in this boat launch and just do a couple pictures really quick in the rain? And they were game. They were totally down for it. And as you can see, it turned out great. You know, we did actually end up rescheduling, but we got some great pictures for about 10 minutes. Again, here's pictures in the snow. There's my get really close and then start to laugh picture. That's Rice Creek if you've ever been there. My wife told me this picture was too steamy for a TED Talk, but bringing you know, like their interests including their interests into their pictures is important for any type of portrait photography, seniors especially, couples. So he's obviously a fireman, not pretending to be one. And they wanted to do pictures in the firehouse, and these pictures are some of my favorite that I ever took. And that was actually the couple that got rained out from the first picture. So they got 2 shoots for the price of 1. This is just an example of a different setting. This is in, obviously, anybody know where that is? That spot. What's that? Yeah, it's, what do you call it? St. Anthony, Maine. Yeah, popular. I actually don't love shooting there because it's really inundated with photographers and yeah, the city actually a couple years ago made it so you have to get a permit to shoot there to try and cut down on how many people are there, because you could be shooting pictures there. I've been there before doing pictures and there's 15 photographers, and you're basically standing in line to get this shot. You know, it's kind of weird. Nobody gets permits still, but you're supposed to have them. Anyway, and then here's another picture of including some interests into the photos. She was very passionate about her horse, and we included the horse in the pictures. And this is a sunset picture with off-camera lighting, which is something I'm really passionate about. And maybe I come back another time, I could talk about doing off-camera lighting, but that's sort of my trademark. Oh, and talking about the different types of scenarios where sometimes you have to work a little harder or not have to work as hard. This was a couple that hired me to do their wedding. This was their engagement shoot, and they're actually an autistic couple, special needs. And so when I got to know, so when we were hired, started my process of really getting to know them and building that rapport. And it was especially important with this couple because if you're familiar with people with autism, they tend to have trouble connecting with people and have trouble being comfortable sometimes. But as you can see, the hard work paid off, and I put in a lot of work to get to know them, and they were really comfortable with me. And the guy, he was so sweet. The guy at his wedding started to cry, and he gave me a hug, and he thanked me for making his wedding day perfect, which really touched me. So anyway, next I'm going to talk about weddings. Is there anybody here who shoots weddings or wants to shoot weddings?
Anybody forced to shoot a wedding?
Or forced to shoot weddings?
I did one and not do it again.
Yeah. So I'll try not to go on and on about weddings then. I think there's some important things to talk about with weddings because it applies to, as it says here, weddings tend to end up including multiple different portrait styles, so you'll have to shoot individuals and family pictures and portraits and candid shots and that sort of thing. So weddings are sort of like all-encompassing when it comes to portraits. It is what I do the most of, but one of the biggest challenge of doing portraits at a wedding is actually comes from the time constraints. I'm guessing you didn't have a great experience shooting a wedding. Was that one of the things that you didn't like, was the timing and that sort of thing?
No, it was more that when those bridezillas where they weren't happy.
Well, that happens. It does happen. I try and kill them with kindness. I'll be honest with you, I don't get a lot. I would be almost 100% honest by saying I've never had a bridezilla that I didn't win over in the end. But honestly, the worst thing sometimes at weddings are momzillas, mother of the brides or mother of the grooms. They tend to try and run the show, and we really try and make sure that people remind people of the purpose of that day is to marry off two youngins. Well, it doesn't always have to be youngins, but it's about them, not about the family as much as some people want it to be. And I always find it's my duty to remind people why they're there, even guests. When we introduce our couples to come up for their first dance, we remind people that they're not there for the free alcohol and food, that they're there to honor and celebrate with the couple. So, but anyway, I'll just talk real briefly about this. I'll try not to be long-winded. Again, some keys to success for shooting weddings is building that connection with your clients. As I said, that's going to be pretty much a key point to all portrait photography for all different styles. Having impeccable scheduling will help you out a ton. You don't want to feel rushed in any sort of portrait photography. If you're doing a family session, you never want to feel rushed because when there's an impending feeling of, oh, come on, Shirley. Totally ruined my TED Talk. That's okay. I'm just teasing. I really don't care. I probably need to.
It was you, Shirley.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you don't want to ever feel every single person's grabbing their phone now, looking to make sure it's off. You never want to have the feeling of that impending feeling that you need to hurry through and get finished, because the whole idea of having natural looking photos is just having your subject feel completely comfortable, and you can't feel comfortable if you're worried about time.
So, excuse me.
Yes?
Then how much time do you allow for pre-wedding photos?
So my wife is actually the taskmaster. She sort of comes up with the schedule of the day. I always tell people I'm the funny and she's the money. She makes all the schedules. She gets in contact with the bride and groom for, like normally around a month before, and we give them, a lot of times people don't know how much time to give for, say, family formals, or how much time they need to do a first look, if anybody knows what that is. That's when the bride and the groom kind of see each other for the first time. But we've done so many weddings that we have so many versions of schedules that we've given, and we actually will typically kind of give them a sample timeline, and we ask them key questions like how many people are going to be involved in formal photos. We ask them to give us a specific list of every photo that they want taken. So, and we ask them to be really accurate on that. So I want the bride with the bride's family, the bride and groom with the bride's family, the bride with the groom's family, the bride and groom with the groom's family. The direct, we literally have a list, and we shoot, and when we look at that list, we say, okay, we can do these family formals in 35 minutes. So we allow 40, and we give ourselves wiggle room. So everything that we do is impeccably timed. We include travel time, we include all of that sort of thing. So does that answer your question? Yeah. So yes, but at the same time, with having that schedule, you want to have flexibility in your and ability to adapt to changes, because your spot that you picked out for family portraits that has beautiful light, because we've got cloud cover at the time when you picked it out, suddenly it's sunny out, there's no clouds, and that lighting turned into hard light, hard shadows, and are creating crazy marks on people's faces and that sort of thing. Kind of like what you're trying to hide right now, get rid of. So sometimes you have to be flexible and relocate. You have to have the ability to think on your feet and move. And also, you have to have the ability to work with less than desirable backgrounds. And this is true with any sort of portrait photography, whether it's weddings or typically if you're doing engagement shoots or family shoots, you're going to choose the location based on it looking nice. But sometimes when you're shooting a wedding, the venue that they chose maybe doesn't have nice things in the surrounding. Yes?
Or in my case, they have a very specific idea. It was an outdoor wedding. They wanted photos up by the lake for them. They would not have anywhere else but the lake.
Well, the client's always right. What they want, you can always try and talk them into something.
They weren't happy with it.
Right. You're gonna do whatever they want, but you always default to yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. Kind of like with my wife. So, but anyway, an example of that was, does anybody know what the Mermaid is? I can't remember what city it's in. It's not too far away. It's like, yeah, that's it, the Mermaid. Not the most, hopefully nobody's affiliated with them. I don't want to bad talk them, but there's not a lot around there. It's not very pretty. And in fact, you'll see, this is a wedding I was shooting. This is my second shooter, actually. He took this picture of me escorting the bride across a busy road over to a sidewalk, which is basically a ditch. And you can see I stuffed them in the ditch and took the picture on the right there. And I took all the formal pictures there as well. And if you were driving by, your naked eye might look and be like, why the hell is he taking pictures in the ditch? But at the end of the day, if you're gonna get beautiful pictures, the lighting was good there, and the background, I threw it out of focus, shot at a low aperture, and was able to get nice pictures. Here's a couple pictures of some weddings. If you have a question about how an image was captured, feel free to shout it out. This is actually Sue's barn. Yep. Those bubbles there are actually from, you can see in the picture there, they're those guns, the battery operated guns. So it turned out really cool. This is in a church, a completely different type of setting. This is in Minneapolis.
So another question. So
Yeah, please.
You probably are taking pictures of places you had never taken pictures before.
Yes.
So do you go there ahead of time and sort of scope it out and kind of see, like, okay, yeah, like at this time of day, what's the light look like?
Yeah, you can. If you have time to do that, you can. I don't typically have the time to do that, but what I will do is do a bit of Google stalking. Somebody's shot a wedding there before, and if you just go on Google and type in wedding pictures at Maple Ridge Farm, and pictures pop up at that venue, you can kind of get an idea of what people have done in the past. Or a lot of times venues, the website for a venue will have tons of pictures, and you can kind of use that as a way to sort of, I purposely try and do things that are completely different than what I see other people have done. That's just kind of my stubbornness and wanting to be different and unique. So, and I'm super ADHD, so I walk around at a venue and I'll all of a sudden stop. Oh, shiny things! I want to take a picture here. So that's just kind of the way I roll. I like to kind of shoot from the hip. I'm the Brett Favre of photography.
Not throwing across the button.
This was a barn wedding in Wisconsin, and that picture on the bottom left, although it's people, it's their feet. And it's one of my favorite pictures I ever took because they were so sweet, they were so lovely, and you know, some brides are really precious about their dress and they don't want it to get dirty. But it was clearly a rainy day, and it wasn't exactly perfect in that regard. But this picture just shows how much fun they had, and this was at the dance. And I felt like I missed a trick a little bit because the bride later posted it on Facebook with the caption "Dirty Dancing," which I thought was really clever. So, family sessions. Some of you may recognize a subject in this photo. Family portraits are actually fairly predictable in most circumstances, and thus amongst the easiest to capture. I know that's going to sound provocative, but I promise it is, in my opinion anyway, but that's if you know how to lead, okay? Family portraits, I think, are probably the first step to shooting portraits. It's the most easily accessible for people to take pictures of, because everybody knows a family somewhere that you can take a picture of. It's sort of the gateway to portrait photography, I think, for anybody who's starting to do portrait photography. Some keys to success for family portraits. I feel really passionate about these. Family portraits are some of my favorites to take. One thing that you should really make sure you do when shooting family portraits or kids in general is don't start shooting pictures right away. You want to take your time and get to know the family. And this is even at a wedding with kids and that sort of thing. If you show up, your family shows up and you say, all right, and you march to the location and you start taking pictures, the kids are going to do this one where they cling on to dad's shoulder and look back kind of at you and, you know, stranger danger. They don't know what's happening and they're going to be closed off to you. The very first thing I do is I don't even take my camera out. The little Johnny hops out of the minivan and he's holding his He-Man character. I was like, He-Man, oh my gosh, I love He-Man. And little Susie jumps out and she's got her water cup with Princess Elsa on it from Frozen. And I was like, oh, Princess Elsa, my daughter Lily loves Frozen. Who's your favorite Disney princess? And I just start to kind of get to know them, and I interact with them, and I get on their level. Not with a camera in my hand, not as a photographer, just as a mom and dad's friend who wants to get to know them. And so I think that's really important. And so even if you do that, it's still going to take a little bit of time for them to warm up to you. But by doing that, you're going to expedite the process. The very beginning of any photo portrait session, whether it's kids or anybody, is always going to be kind of considered a warm-up, right? The pictures are always going to get better and better and better as people get more and more comfortable. But if you take that time to really get to know them at the very beginning, you're going to expedite that process of having the pictures get better. Make sure you know your expectations with family pictures. Do they want more pictures of the full group? Do they want more pictures of just the kids? Do they want a picture with dad and the kids and mom with the kids, different combinations? Do they want just the boys and just the girls? So it's really good that you ask for the expectations up front so that people know. so that you know what they're looking for, because nothing's worse than getting through a photo session. The kids get tired and worn out and don't want to do it anymore, and you didn't get the pictures that mom wanted. So really find out what they're looking for. Once you set those expectations, choose what you start photographing, and don't wear the kiddos out too fast. So Shirley's shoot here we did was actually an extended family shoot, so it was a large shoot. And so we started with the big group first, because once we finished the big group and then we moved on to the individual capsule families, the ones that we finished could be done, and that way those kids don't get worn out. And so you need to make sure that you're understanding how much time you need to spend. If it's a 1 hour shoot, you need to make sure that you're allowing enough time to capture the large group as well as the capsules. So at large, and then the next thing here says large group versus small groups and management of time. You might not be able to spend as much time taking pictures of the kids by themselves if you're doing a large group. If you're doing a small group, just a single family, then you might have more time to really break it down and sit with the kids, have the kids slide down the slide at the playground and have them run around and that sort of thing. Yes?
How do you get everybody to smile at the same time?
Oh, I got some great ideas for that. We'll talk about that.
And two,
Shirley's,
about the one person that has their eyes closed, everything else is perfect.
oh, I could talk about some of that stuff. So first of all, I'm assuming you shoot digital, right? To answer the question about the one person with their eyes closed, you shoot digital. So why didn't you take it? Why didn't you take another one? So it's digital. It's not going to cost you more money. Well, if you're shooting film, I can understand that. But I mean, like, if I do a family session, I'll probably shoot 800 to 1,000 pictures, probably. Click, 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 click. How do I get them all to look at the camera? I'm going to talk about that, some of the prompts that I use. Let me just see
So
something
my
quick
question
here.
was about this one in particular.
Yeah.
There's one person in that photo that did not get the memo about how friendly you are.
Yeah,
And she's
the little one in red.
to her
Yeah.
dad
She,
right
I'm going to talk about shooting kids specifically, and I'll talk about some tricks I use for kiddos. At the end of the day, that's a sweet picture.
Oh, it is.
She looks sweet, and I
This
was
is-
doing something really silly. What did you say they called me?
Party man.
The farty man.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of different things you can do to get reactions out of kids. Fart noises work great.
That's
Not only with kids, a lot of time with dads too, believe it or not. Dads think, who doesn't think farts are funny? Sneezing. I got another slide here for working with kids that I'll talk about some in particular. But you kind of got to just self-deprecate and make yourself look foolish. And I think one of the things that helps me be a great portrait photographer is in my past profession, what I did is I worked on stage, and I was used to having people look at me, and I like that attention and that sort of thing. If you're not a person that likes a lot of attention, there's certain types of portrait photography that you may be better suited for, like glamour or working with adults that you can control a little more. With kids, excuse my language, I make an ass of myself, and I do that on purpose. Those those three kids in the front there are laughing their butts off at me because I was doing dumb things. I think I was hitting myself in the head with apples, making fart noises, hitting myself in the head with a stick or whatever. One of my favorite things to do is I'll say, "Don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. Why are you looking at me?" And I will literally take pictures between my legs, and the automatic eye focus on my camera will I've gotten amazing pictures shooting between my legs before. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more about kids in a second here, but these are some examples. Oh, look at that, look at that. I know that's not exactly a family picture, but I had to embarrass Shirley a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That's actually my brother. So lifestyle photography is another type of family photography, but it tends to be less posed. Typically, you're going to shoot these in somebody's house or at a place, you know, that they're comfortable just sort of being themselves. You're just photographing your clients in a natural, unposed situation. I like to think of it as a day in the life of. Like you can see in this picture that I have here, they're just in their kitchen. The little boy's playing with Legos, and they have a newborn. A lot of my personal lifestyle photos tend to be newborns for some reason. I think that's just the style I like to shoot. I'm not really an Ann Getty's baby in a basket newborn photographer. I like to shoot just like natural, just like in their house feeding or doing that kind of thing. So that's what most of my lifestyle photography is. Just like a family session, don't start shooting right away. Take your time to get to know your family. Become that fly on the wall. Some of the cool things about lifestyle photography is you can use different aspects of the house or the room to create like some interesting framing. Like you don't have to be in the same room as your family when you're taking the picture. Stand through the outside of the doorway and shoot in using your rule of thirds and have the door frame be on the left. And it's like it's pulling you into the room, and it's like you're just viewing the family from a different room, just like you would in real life. Like if you were walking by and you look through the door, it's just a family doing their thing in there. You want to give your clients activities to do. This is kind of like with your engagement session, giving them prompts. So you're gonna, ask mom to lay on the bed and read a book to the kiddos, or maybe dad. What could be mom and daughter, or somebody, or dad and daughter playing catch. Doesn't have to be just the boys, or actually cooking dinner, just making dinner for them to sit down and eat. Well, they sit down and they eat their dinner. How cool is that? Just like to kind of stand in the corner and take pictures of a family scooping up spaghetti onto a plate. That's lifestyle photography. And you want to, like I said, try multiple rooms in different locations in the house. Here's a couple ideas of what some lifestyle portraits look like.
That's a tiny baby.
Yeah, there was a tiny one. It's actually my cousin. But here's, oops, go backwards. That's an example of what I was saying, like shooting from another room. I'm using the banister in front to sort of like create depth and give you a feeling of. So she's feeding the baby. That's kind of a private moment, right? So you don't necessarily want to be like all up in the business of the mother feeding the baby, because that just feels kind of like it's an intimate, private moment, and it doesn't. So like by putting something in the foreground and taking it from a distance, sort of gives it more of a private feeling, right? And now I'm going to talk about kids a little bit. So kids, everybody who has kids in their family they can take pictures of here. Probably everybody, right? And I'm sure as photographers, that's probably, if you're not comfortable doing portrait photography, that's probably the closest thing you do to taking portrait photography is taking pictures of your kids or your grandkids or whatnot. So some keys to success. I'll just read this. It says, shooting kids is one of my favorite things to do. It's indeed challenging, but also rewarding. When working with kiddos, it's important to remember that you're pretty much at the mercy of their willingness to participate. Some keys to success. Again, don't start shooting right away. Get to know them. I've sort of established that already. Take your time, get to know them. This is super important. Avoid distractions with kids. No help from mom and dad. Did I do that with your shoot? Did I yell at you guys or anybody?
We were just laughing at you, so it worked really well.
Okay, so especially it happens a lot at weddings because there's so many people there. But say you're shooting a picture of some kids, and the first thing moms and dads and grandmas want to do is stand behind you and go, Johnny, look at the camera. Johnny, look here, look at the camera. And they're like trying their best to help you, but really all they're doing is making it way harder for you. Or even worse, they're standing off to the side and they're going, Johnny, look at the camera. What's Johnny gonna do? He's gonna turn and look at grandma. So I basically ban everybody. I just tell them, listen, you guys just have to trust me, and I promise you I'll get pictures of the kids, but I need you guys to just do me a big favor. Stay out of line of sight, and if you guys could just stay quiet for the next couple minutes while I work with the kids. And I promise you I'll get great pictures of the kids, but I need you guys' help to not try and help, because it's not going to. Sometimes you get people that won't listen to that advice and still shout out and say things, and you just kind of got to deal with it. So make sure the kids are rested and fed. You want to make sure that the kids don't show up tired already, because you're never going to get good pictures of the kids if they're exhausted and hungry. I always tell my moms and dads, bring snacks, bring juice boxes, take breaks. I think I write that on here somewhere. Don't be afraid to take breaks and let them have a snack and eat and that sort of thing. One of my tricks, you were asking about how I get kids to look at me. And I'm sure I must have done this. I do it with pretty much every time I shoot kids. I call it my 1, 2, 3 tickle technique, right? So what you do is I have my camera in my hand. I tell the adults first. I say, all right, I'm going to play with the kids. It's really important that all the adults stay looking at me. Don't be tempted to look at the kids, because it never fails. I play with the kiddos and get them to look at me, and mom and dad are going, they're looking at the kids. And I'm like, no, stay looking at me. Grown-ups, stay focused on me and just let me play with the kiddos, and I'll be able to grab a picture with everybody looking at the camera. So my 1, 2, 3 tickle technique, it goes like this. After you inform the parents not to look at the kids, you start off by going 1, 2, 3, and you run up and you tickle the little one and you run away again. And now you do it again. 1, 2, 3, and you sort of they know. So now I come back, and what are they going to do? As soon as I go 1, what are they all doing? They're ready. They know what's going to happen. So I go 1, click, 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 click. 2, click, 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 3, and then I run up and I tickle a different little kid. And you just kind of rinse and repeat and do that over and over again until either they lose interest or you get your shot. And it only takes me like 2 or 3 times, and I always get my picture that way. Every once in a while, if you got a kiddo that's like has a lot of stranger danger, and you'll figure it out after the very first time you do it. You go 3, and you run up and you start to tickle them. If they start to cry, you're probably not going to do it again. But that happens only every once in a while. As I mentioned earlier, self-deprecation. Whack yourself in the head with, or if you have a toy, I'll bring toys with sometimes, and I'll throw the toy to the kids, and then have them throw it back to me. And when they throw it to me, I'll go, oh, "Are you ready?" And I'll pretend like I'm going to throw it, and they don't. And they're ready for it, and they're just staring at me, smiling, waiting, and I click, 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 click. So these are just little tricks. I'm making myself out of breath. Don't ever say cheese. It's literally the bane of my existence. I hate it. It's the worst. Never tell kids to say cheese, because when they say cheese, pretty much they're gonna look like they're constipated from eating too much cheese. Cheese. Instead, have them say other words like hi. Have you guys say hi?
Yep.
Hi is one of the best. It works with little kids. It works with adults. Everybody say hi. Everybody say hi.
Hi.
Look at you're all smiling and looking at me. Your mouth kind of forms a smile naturally when you say hi. Okay, especially when you tell them to say it and you say it in a silly way. The one thing you have to look out for with that is the real little ones. Everybody say hi, and they go. So sometimes you have to look out for that. And then other things like ice cream is a good one. And then other words that don't actually form a nice smile, that just sound ridiculous. Say poopsicle, and then everybody laughs because it's a funny word. And then again, just get on their level, like get down. I spend a lot of time on my knees, down low, talking to kids. And sort of, my wife just tells me it's because I'm immature and sort of have a child's mentality anyway, is why I'm so good with kids. Here's a couple of examples of some kiddos. And this little guy here, I put this in here on purpose. This little guy here was not having a good day. I did get some family pictures of him where he was smiling. But for the most part, he was not feeling it. It was really cold. You want to make sure that your kids, when you're shooting kids, that the weather is good for kiddos to be out in the weather. But anyway, I included that one to show that it's not always perfect. But it's a cute picture still. Mom loved it. I don't. If people ask me, I will send them what's called like a style board, and you can find them on Pinterest. If you go to Pinterest and just type in family photo attire, and you can get, you know, there's what do they call them? Inspiration boards or whatever. My wife sort of deals with most of that stuff, but we have links to send. Sometimes moms will send us pictures of like their wardrobe laid on a bed, and we can say, oh, that looks great, or whatever. One thing that's important is like a lot of times in the fall, people want to wear fall colors. So like if the leaves are changing and they're orange trees, you don't want everybody to wear brown and orange and green, because they're just going to kind of blend into the background. But like other colors in that same sort of vein, like a burnt red or white or a yellow, and then you have to sort of like use those, whatever they're wearing, in conjunction with your background. So like if this was this particular background was green, I mean I didn't really think about it, I guess, in this particular case. But if they were all wearing green, I probably wouldn't have gotten the same, you know, contrast with the picture. So you gotta just think about that sort of thing. But yep.
What f-stop do you typically shoot at? I mean, it's got to be pretty low.
I'm what they call a bokeh whore, I guess. So the majority of my photography I shoot with prime lenses. My go-to lens is a 50 mil 1.2, and I shoot a lot at 1.2. You know, so like a picture like this, if everybody sort of knows how aperture works, it's gonna change your focal plane, right? How much of a focal plane is in focus. When you're shooting a group, you typically don't want to shoot 1.2 because like their eyes are not on the same focal plane, right? So if I focus on the front little boy versus then the back two that may not be in focus as much as the front two are. I kind of look for the overall style more, so I don't let that rule me. Like, I definitely shoot wider than I probably should in certain circumstances, but a lot of times I'll mix it up. So like I'll shoot at 1.2, I'll shoot a bunch of pictures at 1.2, and just to be safe, I might switch it to 2.8 real quick and take another burst of like 15 or 20 pictures with the same pose here. But typically I shoot real low aperture. And depending on how close you are or how far away you are, you can get away with it. You know, if you're real close and you're shooting 1.2, obviously your focal plane is going to be a lot smaller. If I'm, you know, 30 feet away and I'm shooting 1.2, I have a little bit more room there. Good question though. Actually, this lens that I have on here is a new lens I got, well, about a year ago. This is a 28 to 70 2.0. So it's not a prime lens. It's a zoom lens, but has almost an aperture that typically primes come with. And since I got this lens, I use this pretty exclusively when I'm shooting weddings now because it's so good. Even though I love prime lenses, it just adds a lot of flexibility and gives me that bokeh look, especially when I'm zoomed into 70. Downfalls are it's very heavy, and it also costs an arm and a leg. So the lens is, I think, $3,600 alone. So,
Brad,
yeah.
What do you mean by bokeh?
Bokeh. So bokeh, or bokeh, as some people say, that's when you shoot. So, for instance, on this shot here, her eyes are sharp, but see the fade here in the background's out of focus. That's because I shot this probably at 1.4 or 1.2 on a 50 mil lens. If I shot this at f8, then the fall off for the out of focus bits would be more in focus. So the focal plane gets bigger. So bokeh is sort of just like that dreamy out of focus look behind. And every lens has, like especially prime lenses are known for having better bokeh because they have like a more dreamy look. Or you ever seen like, let me see if I just go back here really quick, if I can find an example of some lights or something. Oh, well, the bubbles, for sure. So see how right here, this is obviously my focus point, and so this bubble right here is pretty close to probably in the same plane as their eyes. But like, see this big round blob there? That bubble is probably very close to the camera. And these ones back here, like back here that are really out of focus and they kind of have like a blob look, that's bokeh. So they're out of focus bits.
So do you remember how far away roughly you were? And
That was, for this shot, I'd have to look, I think that's a 50 mil lens. It could be this lens too. But they had just had their first kiss and they were walking down the aisle on their recessional, and I stopped them. I do this with every wedding. I have them stop about halfway down the aisle and have another kiss. It's my safety kiss shot in case I didn't get their first kiss really good. And it's normally one of my favorite pictures from the ceremony anyway. I bet I was probably 8 feet away, typically. Yep. Anyway, sorry, let me blow through these. Am I taking too much time?
No, it's really good.
Where was I?
You were in kids already. Seniors.
We went past kids, didn't we?
Yep.
Suppose I could have just hit escape and done it faster. But you get to look at all my work again.
There you go.
Okay. All right, so yeah, seniors. Senior portraits are probably another easy to get into portrait photography sort of thing. I think it's again, with your kids, if you have grandkids or whatnot, everybody probably knows somebody who's getting close to graduating at some point. Taking portraits for 1 to 2 hours of an 18-year-old high school student can be a challenge. Most of them are very nervous and feel awkward, especially the guys. And here's a few tips for photographing seniors. A lot of times the guys don't even want to do the pictures, mom's just making them do it. One of the things I do to make my senior sessions successful is I ask a ton of questions while I'm shooting. Again, building that rapport and making that connection. With the guys, I ask them, do you play any sports? Are you involved in any team sports? Oh, you play football? I played football when I was in school too. What position? Oh, wide receiver? I was a quarterback. You got a ball? We should throw the ball a little bit. You know, whatever. I just kind of BSing with them a little bit, getting them to feel comfortable, asking them about where they're going to go to school, you know, what their plans are after high school, that sort of thing. Any sort of communication with them just to get them to feel comfortable. Sometimes the kiddos will feel more comfortable without mom or dad hounding over them. I usually recommend mom and dad hang out for the first 10 minutes or so to make sure that you're not a pervert, to make them feel comfortable. And then I get them to go off and grab coffee and relax. Sometimes the kids want mom and dad to be there. You just sort of have to feel that out and ask them. I really don't love having mom standing over my shoulder and barking orders at the girl. Oh no, smile. That's not a real smile. Smile real. No, fix your hair. It looks all weird, you know, like that's what I do. That's what I'm here for. I'm gonna get her to smile good. I'm gonna make sure her hair looks good, or my wife, and I don't need mom's help. I promise mom I'm gonna get good pictures. Like I said, I normally encourage them to hang out for a few minutes before, you know, at the very beginning, and then take off. Because once mom and dad leave, it's almost always the pictures get better because they just become, you know, they just feel more comfortable. You gotta watch for oily skin with teenagers. A lot of times, you know, the T-zone here, especially with boys, also with girls. They get that shiny, you know, reflection on their forehead and their cheekbones because their skin's a little bit more oily at that age. She actually, as I mentioned that, I'm looking at her picture. She's very, very pale. I love these photos. She's super, just a unique girl. She's kind of got that, I guess the kids call it emo, the emo vibe, you know, really into dark makeup and light skin. That real light on her cheeks is makeup actually. I try and tell my girls not to use too much makeup. I'd rather touch up spots in Photoshop than try and make unnatural makeup look natural, if that makes sense. anyway, yeah, you want to use their interests, like if they play football, have them wear the letter jacket, have them hold a football out, and that sort of thing. Just that honestly will make them feel more comfortable because it's including things that they're passionate about in their photos. Here's a couple examples. That's actually the Franconia Sculpture Garden. That's the Stone Arch Bridge area again. There's some ideas of like using hockey, for example. And it's important to know with portrait photography, this picture here, I included this on purpose because you don't always have to be looking at the camera or have your eyes open. That's a real genuine example of emotion there. He's just, I did something stupid to make him laugh. And I loved that picture, I just thought it was cool. And again, she was really into horses, so we included that in her pictures. Headshot photography is typically taken for corporate use or more artistically for people in the acting industry. I had lots of actors' headshots growing up as a performer. In theory, they're easy, but it's important to build connections still to make your client look natural. I won't spend a ton of time on this. It's sort of a pretty niche market, headshot photography. I do a lot of headshots for like real estate brokers or this was a dental office. I did headshots for everybody in the office. Keys to success is you want to have great lighting for headshots. You want to know the difference between masculine and feminine lighting, and that doesn't even have to be in regards to like off-camera flash or anything like that. Just even like outside. Masculine and feminine lighting, what I mean by that is soft light is typically better for women. You know, women want to glow and have a night, they don't want hard shadows and that sort of thing. With guys, you can get away with that a little bit more with hard shadows because they want that, you know, masculine jawline and their cheekbones. It's okay for that. Focal length is really important when you're taking any portraits really, but especially for headshots. By focal length, I mean what lens you're using. So if I take a picture, I actually have a diagram that I'm going to show you in a second, but if I take a picture of Dick using a 35mm lens for a headshot right here, and then I take a picture of Dick with a 50mm lens, I'm still filling out the framing exactly the same, but at a different focal length. And then I take one with a 70mm lens, and then a 200mm lens further away. It's that focal length has a profound impact on how the shape of the face looks. If you're using a wide angle lens and you're filling the frame here, it's going to give a real sort of round, sort of fisheye sort of feel. And a lot of times people don't like that. It makes them kind of, people look a little, it's just not pleasing to the eye. But as soon as you get to that like 135mm or a 200mm lens, people love that. I think 85mm is kind of the sweet spot for headshots or portraits because it's just aesthetically pleasing. It makes people look thinner and just looks nice. I'm going to just go to this thing to show you what I mean by that. So if you look on the far left, that's a 24mm lens, and I think we could all agree that. So 85 is what I said is the sweet spot for portraits, for headshots especially. I think everybody could probably agree that this looks much more aesthetically pleasing than that, right? I mean, you feel free to disagree, but do you guys agree or no?
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's a pretty profound difference from here to there. Just by it's literally the same person in the same framing, but just with a different focal length. So if you are using a kit lens or something that has some sort of like zoom on it, like this is a 28-70, shooting at 70 is going to be way better than shooting this lens at 24 for portraits. Unless you're looking for that style, like if you're shooting a picture of a clown with a clown nose, getting up real close with a 24mm lens might feed into that look. You know, it would look cool. But for portraits, a longer focal length, and also it makes the background look more compressed and just looks nicer. Here's your bokeh again to answer your question. So the difference between that background there and that background background is pretty profound, right? And that, I think that looks nicer because it really puts the focus on your subject rather than the background. Unless you're doing environmental portraits where you specifically want the background to be part of that image. So understanding body position is really important with all portraits, but especially headshots. You know, I like people never stand square to the camera. I always have them stand, if my camera's here, I always have them stand on a little bit of a diagonal facing my light source. My light source is coming from here, so that I have fall off on this side of my face for shadow, and my camera's there. If I have them square onto the camera, it just doesn't look as appealing. Also, you never want to shoot from, you want to kind of, when you're doing headshots, and most portraits for that matter, I think that you want to be at eye level with the camera. If you're shooting from below or above, it's going to give you a different feeling. So you can shoot from above. If you shoot from above, it's going to give more of like a submissive feeling. If you shoot from below, it gives a more powerful feeling. A lot of times with like at a wedding with groomsmen, I'll shoot from down low to give that superhero feel. But if you're shooting a bride and she's sitting in a chair and you're shooting from down on her, it kind of gives it more of kind of like a damsel in distress sort of vibe, I suppose, maybe. I don't know, I'm just making this up as I go. So anyway, and communicate, building rapport is really important, even in headshots, because you know, everybody when they, you know, this was a dental office and they came in and they all wanted headshots, and it was important that I got them to look, you know, everybody, none of these people are models, right? And they're all concerned about what they're gonna look like on the website. They don't wanna look stupid. And a lot of times they come in and they all act like they don't care. Oh, whatever, just take my picture, they don't care. But you know they all care, right? So by talking to them and getting them to laugh and just communicating with them, I get nice natural smiles from everybody. So these were all just from one headshot shoot that I did. So I'm going to talk real quickly. Again, I don't know how long I'm supposed to go for. These are the 5 elements of portrait photography as I see it. So you're going to use all 5 of these things on all the different styles of portrait photography. In no particular order, I'm going to talk about location is important. Everybody heard that term, location, location, location. Typically that's used with like real estate, but it's true with photography. The location is going to have a huge impact on the overall look and style of your photo. You know, some people want pictures in the city, some people want pictures in the country, some people want, you know, brick backgrounds, some people want grass backgrounds, some people want corn, some people, you know, and all of those different aspects are going to change the total overall look of your picture. So you really want to think about that ahead of time, and your clients will tell you what they want from their pictures. What I love to do is find places that have a mixture of both, you know, that have the ability to so like that St. Anthony, Maine area, there's a place called the Lower Trail, which has kind of got like grass and bridges and that sort of thing. And then we can go up on the street and do stuff in the city as well. So lighting is much more important to portraits than you might think. Soft light versus dynamic light is one of the things I talked about earlier. If I ever come back and talk about off-camera lighting, I can get into this much more extensively. But the difference between, does anybody know what the inverse law is when it comes to light? So like the smaller a light source is and the closer it is, the smaller a light source is and the further away it is, the harder the light's gonna be. But the bigger it is and the closer it is, the softer the light's gonna be. So typically you want a big light source as close as you can. And so like when you're talking about real soft light, so a cloud in the sky is a huge diffuser, right? Versus the sun coming straight onto your subject is gonna be hard light. Another natural reflector could be like if you're standing somewhere and there's a white building, that white building is going to reflect light. That's going to be a reflector. Natural light versus powered light. I like to call this the stigma flash, because a lot of times, so the photography industry is inundated with people now who call themselves professional photographers, right? Anybody can call themselves a professional photographer. There's no certificate that you need. And the biggest thing you'll hear people say is, oh, I only shoot natural light. I'm a natural light photographer, which just drives me nuts, because what that means to me is you just don't know how to shoot. You don't know how to use powered light or off-camera lighting correctly. All those pictures that I got, those dynamic sunset pictures, I could never do using only natural light. There's no way, because you can't balance out shooting into the sun without a light lighting them on the front, right? Because you guys all know what I'm talking about. If I expose my background based on the background light without any light in the front, they're going to be underexposed. If I expose my subject based on just my subject, then the background's going to be all blown out and overexposed. So the only way to get to balance light and to make pictures look dynamic is to use off-camera lighting. But never let anybody tell you that using artificial lighting is a bad thing. The only thing I will say to that is the next thing here says on-axis or off-axis light. Does anybody know what that means? So if you put a flash on top of your camera, or if you have a camera that has a built-in flash, when that flash goes off, that's called on-axis lighting. So basically what that means is anywhere I point this camera, that lighting is coming from the same source as the lens. So the lighting is going to be flat, and it's going to hit the face or the subject at exactly the same angle, right? Unless you bounce it or something, which is when I do use an on-camera flash, that's how I use it, is I'll crank the flash to bounce it off a wall or hit the ceiling and light. If someone's using an on-camera flash that's on top of their camera to shoot portraits, they probably, typically I would call them people that are still learning, personally. Off-camera, off-axis lighting, which I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a really important thing trick to learn is off-camera, off-axis lighting. If you're using a wireless trigger and have your light source from the side over here, and I'm taking a picture and that light hits your subject, it's creating a dynamic, sort of more appealing light, right? It falls off and it just looks nicer. Again, I could talk about lighting another time. I'm really passionate about lighting. I want to just mention this. Use shadows and highlights to guide you. One of the big things I do is, and you can do it in this room even, if you take your hand, and people like my clients see me doing this sometimes and they're like, what the hell is he doing? But I'll take my hand and I'll just walk around and I'll turn and I'll see where the light is. So like right there, my hand's in shadow, but as soon as I turn my hand right there, that light coming from the window lights my hand up. So I know that's the direction I want my subjects to face. I use my ring. If I hold my ring out like this, the specular highlights on my ring are going to show me where the light source is coming from. So when I look at my ring, when the light hits my ring and there's a specular highlight, well, when I'm looking at this right now, the specular highlight's right there, which is telling me that the light's coming from over there. So use things like shadows and highlights to tell you where the best place to light your subject is. If you come up to a place in a field and you're not sure which direction to face them to take the picture, stick your hand out and just move around until your hand looks nice and bright, or the brightest, and that's the direction you want them to face. Lighting is a huge creative tool. Again, I would love to talk about lighting another time. Composition is a huge part of the overall look of your portraits, but don't let it control your shoot, because much of your final composition will be decided in your post-processing. So what I mean by that is, if it's like, I think of it as like a haircut, right? You can always cut your hair to whatever length you want, but you can't add the hair back on. So if I'm taking a picture of Dick, if I take my picture and I think in my head I want a tight crop, so I cut off the top of his head, which is okay, by the way, a tight crop, it's okay to cut somebody's head off. But if I take that picture that way, I can't add the top of his head back on if I really want to. But if I take the picture from here, I'm going to be able to crop that picture to a tight crop. So framing is important in the overall look of your image, but I always tell people just shoot the picture and then worry about your framing afterwards. Think about your rules of thirds. Does everybody know what that is? It's kind of one of the most basic things we learn as photographers is rule of thirds. Or the things that you do want to think about is like the placement of a horizon. If you have somebody standing in a field and there's the horizon going right through their neck or through the middle of their head, you might want to drop down a little bit lower and put that horizon more like here on their shoulders, or even go up higher and let the horizon be up higher, depending on the look you want. But yeah, so you can play that game of positioning yourself so that your horizon's in the right place. And I wrote here, don't be afraid of tight crops. Portraits don't always have to be portraits, right? So we call these portraits, and then the wide ones we call landscape, right? Portraits can be landscape photos. In fact, I think that's my favorite type of portrait, is a tight crop landscape photo. Anyway, emotion is, in my opinion, the single most important part of portrait photography. It's important to know that not all clients are willing to connect with you, so you're at the mercy of their willingness to make that connection. But that shouldn't stop you from pushing for that connection. So a lot of times, especially like when I'm shooting brides and grooms, every once in a while I get a groom who's just kind of like not into it. You know, he's like, his wife is making him, his fiance's making him do it, and he's like, okay, I'll show up, I'll put on whatever Pinterest told you to make me wear, I'm gonna put it on, and he's there, and I have to win him over. Even if he's hard work, I gotta win him over. You know, I can feel that out. I'm really good at kind of feeling people's sort of their vibe, and you know, you could even say to him, I bet you'd rather be home watching the Wild game tonight, huh? Yeah, me too. Just kidding. You know, I'm here for a reason. But don't worry, man. I'm gonna make this as painless as I can for you. You know, God knows we both want to make her happy, right? Suddenly, like, I'm on his side, he's on my side, we're getting along, and you know what? At the end of the day, all the fun little interactions that I have with them, he gets to, you know, make out with his girl and grab her butt and do fun things. So I tend to always win them over, but you do have to work hard sometimes. But you know, that emotion is a huge, huge part of portrait photography. Maybe a little less so when you're doing things like lifestyle, because you're not influencing that as much. You're just kind of letting them. But I guess you're capturing emotion, just not directing it. I always try and invoke emotion by using the prompts, some of the prompts I talked about earlier. I'll say things like, you know, while I'm doing pictures of a couple, can you guys believe that in 6 months you're going to be married? Have you thought about that? You know, things like that. I just try and make them think about things that bring emotion about. And then I challenge your subjects to take risks. That will typically bring up emotion. Make them step outside their comfort zone. Some of my favorite things that I like to have people do, even families, is I like to do these walking shots where they're holding hands and looking at each other and talking, and you know, if I set that up and I'm having them do that and I'm getting this, that's not really exciting. So what I might have them do is like, all right, this time I want you to walk, and I want you all to like try and bump each other's butts together, and they laugh, and about halfway they stop doing it, and then they're walking and they're just laughing, and that's when you get the picture. So last thing is the technical aspects of photography. It's something that I'm really passionate about. I'm a huge nerd. I love the technical aspects of photography and learning about them. I can't even tell you how many hours I've spent on YouTube or Creative Live learning the different technical aspects of photography. I think it's probably one of the things I'm most passionate about in photography. But it's important to not let it get in the way of your work. So what I mean by that is, there's important things, right? Like, you want your pictures to be sharp and in focus. But you know what? I've had pictures that looked absolutely beautiful that my clients loved that weren't super sharp and in focus. In fact, they were a little bit on the soft side. And like, I look at that, and as somebody who's self-critiquing, I say, damn, that picture's out of focus. But it invoked an amazing emotional moment, or it was a super cute moment with a kid eating with his hand in the wedding cake, or whatever it was. There's ways around bad technical aspects. So I always tell people, don't let the technical part get in the way. Some important technical aspects, obviously focus. We talked a little bit about the difference between shooting a 1.4 aperture versus like an f4. That will help you with your focus. It also affects the look of the photo, the overall look, but it will allow you to have sharp focus. The type of lens that you use matters. We talked a little bit about focal length already. A zoom lens versus a prime lens, for instance, will not only change the look of the photo, but also change the your ability to maybe capture a large group in a small room. Technical aspects of lighting are really important. It's really important that we understand how aperture, shutter, and ISO control your overall light, right? Does everybody, you don't have to raise a hand and embarrass yourself, but if you don't understand what aperture, shutter, and ISO do, all three things specifically to control light, then you should really go on YouTube and YouTube that. That's super important. Because all of those things, I think that's the first thing when my wife joined me on the photography side, that's the first thing we worked on, was learning those three things. You want to think about the overall style of your images. Lots of that, most of that is going to be done in your post-production. So learning, I saw that you're going to be learning with somebody, I believe it was you. You're going to be working in Photoshop Elements, so you can learn about the different looks that you can achieve in there, or Lightroom, using different filters or plugins and that sort of thing. Does everybody shoot RAW? Yeah? Shoot RAW. I promise you that it will help your photography out massively. It gives you so much more control over your image. You can change the overall look of an image shot in RAW so much more than JPEG. You know, you can change the mood of a picture. You can take a picture that's shot in RAW. If you had shot that picture in JPEG and it had a Kelvin of 5400 and had a real warm feel, if you had shot that in RAW, if you really wanted to make it a cool feel, you can drop that down to 3400 and make it a completely different feel, right? But you couldn't do that in JPEG. You can only to a certain degree. So shoot RAW if you can. And then back up, back up, back up. I wrote that 3 times because it means 3 times. I learned from a professional photographer at the very beginning when I was taking pictures that no picture that you have is safe unless you have 3 copies of it. So when I get home from a wedding, before I go to bed, I dump my cards into Lightroom and onto a RAID drive, which makes 3 copies of every single picture. So it's a redundant backup, right? So on one drive, I have 3 copies. There's four hard drives in there, I think, and if one hard drive goes bad, it's still safe. So I have all of my work backed up in that regard, 3 copies, and then I take that hard drive and I make a backup of that RAID hard drive. So I have a backup of my backup, and then I take all the current sessions I'm working on and I copy those to a little external hard drive that I use for my culling process and that sort of thing. So I have more than 3. I typically have 4 or 5 copies of every single image. So it's really important that you make backups. And the last thing I'll say is, don't be afraid to use your program modes on your camera to free you up to connect with your clients. If you're really worried about the technical aspects during a portrait session, worrying about, is my shutter right, is my aperture right, and you're trying to do manual settings, that might stop you from making a connection with your subject. So it's really important that you take advantage of aperture priority mode. I know I want to set my camera at 1.4 so I get real nice blurred background, but I don't want to worry about changing my shutter speed up and down if a cloud comes or whatever. So if you set that aperture priority mode, does everybody know what aperture priority mode is? And you can just use exposure compensation to keep your light meter right in the middle, and you don't really have to think about anything. Highly recommend it. I'm a professional and I still use aperture priority mode still sometimes. It's especially if the light's changing a lot. So yeah, in closing, I just wanted to say, well, thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you today. If there was one thing you could take away from all of this, I think that you probably have it hammered away by now. For me, the most important thing in portrait photography is really just that connection with people, getting them to, building rapport and getting them to trust you, right? And all people, when you're taking pictures of people and doing portraits of people, the most important thing to them is that they look good. That's all they really care about. And your way to achieve that is by making them feel comfortable, right? So whether they know it or not, that they're feeling comfortable, it's gonna show through the end result by the quality of the picture and how natural they look. So I guess with that said, I'll open it up for questions.
I have one.
Yeah.
So we usually do at the holidays, we have about 20 of us that we try and do a group photo. What kind of recommendations would you say? I mean, like, there, like, you have too many rows, sometimes that the back people are blurred and the sides are blurred.
Yep, so large group photos, again, focal length is gonna be important there. A wider angle lens probably, and using a bit higher of an aperture, so to keep them in focus. So you're not gonna wanna shoot a large group at 1.4. Right? You're gonna shoot a large group at f8 or f9, something like that. Sometimes when I'm shooting a large group, like at weddings, I always do at the end of the night what I call my survivor photo, which is basically I get everybody left who's there at the end of the night to come in and do one big photo. I'll shoot that at like f2 because I don't care if the people in the background are focused because I'm focused on my bride and groom, and it's sort of like all the people are sort of part of the environment. But if it's like a family portrait, a large group, you definitely want everyone to be in focus as much as possible. So if you're shooting at a higher aperture, whatever your lighting will allow you to, so with in that particular scenario, being wider, like having a wider focal length, like shooting at like this lens here is 24, so the wider I am, or sorry, 28. If I'm at 28 and f9, I'm gonna get the background's even gonna be mostly in focus there.
Okay.
So, but and then another thing is I always tell people you want them smushed up as much as possible.
Yeah, they don't like sometimes.
Yeah, you gotta. I always make a crude joke, and well, depending on your audience, you might not want to say it, but I'll say, "All right, guys, nuts to butts, come on, get up there, get them close together," and you want people down. Sorry, that's really rude, Doug. Yeah, you want people that that are willing to go on a knee in front and that sort of thing, and then build rows by height. Another trick you can do for that is get on a chair and shoot. If you're up higher and you're shooting down.
Why put a timer? Because I have to run in and get.
Oh, you're gonna be in it. Yeah. Well then, a tripod up. The higher your camera is, it's gonna give you more layers.
Okay.
So, yeah. Good question.
Try that.
Last year I was in a big class reunion photo inside, and it was taken with a drone.
Yep.
Inside a building.
Yep. Again, the higher you go, the more layers you're gonna be able to see. I've done that before. I've taken pictures of drones before. Yes.
How long have you been a professional photographer?
Did I not say that at the beginning? So I've been a professional for, I would say, exclusively doing only photography, probably 9 years maybe. But I've been getting paid to do photography for probably 12 years, something like that. I didn't do it exclusively. When I moved back to Minnesota, I actually worked for Apple. I was a genius, a technician. I got that job when I lived in New York because I needed something to transition to when I moved back here. And I did that for a while I was doing photography. And what happened was other jobs were 80% of my income and photography was 20%. And then the next year, photography was 40% of my income. And then the next year, it was kind of like I was having a hard time being able to to meet the demand of my real job, and then meet the demand of my photography job, because I was splitting, half and half. And it was that point where I sort of, the phrase "leap and the net will appear." I told my wife, I said, I'm going to quit all my other jobs and devote myself to doing photography only. And she was really scared. I was really scared because, again, like, I knew that it's a tough business to get into, because it's a crowded market, and but I knew. So what I decided in order to do that was, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make money with a camera in my hand. If it means doing pictures of real estate, I'll take pictures of buildings and houses if I have to. If I have to do headshots, if I have to do, seniors and families, whatever it was, I was just going to do any type of work that would pay me with a camera in my hand. And at the first year I did that, it went pretty well. I didn't really lose any income. And then the next year after that was when I went from being a photographer who, charged as X amount for a wedding. I realized that if I really want to be taken seriously, I have to charge what I'm worth, which is one of the things that photographers really struggle with. There's a massive race to the bottom when it comes to photography. There's people out there that are shooting weddings for $1,000 for a wedding, or $1,200 for a wedding, and I realized real quickly that I didn't want to compete with those people. So I remember the one year, I'll just say it was one year where I think my wife and I were charging like, I think $1,800 to shoot a wedding, and we changed our prices in 1 year from $1,800 to $3,200 in 1 year. And my wife was terrified. She was mad at me. She thought I was making a really bad decision, and I just said I didn't want to work with clients that only wanted to pay this much. I want to work with clients that want to pay this much, and I think I'm worth this much. And my philosophy was, if I shoot 8 weddings at $1,800, and then the next year I shoot 4 weddings at $3,200, we're in the same place, right? So I have to work half as hard to make the same amount of money, and I'm certain that we can book 4 weddings for the year. And we ended up booking about 16 weddings that year. So because our clients changed, the quality of our clients changed quite a bit, and so yeah.
Were you familiar with your camera before you made that decision?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I felt confident. Like I said, I'm a techno geek, and I really am passionate about knowing what I'm doing. So.
I just want to mention that a couple weeks ago, I met a retired professional photographer, and his specialty was shooting golf courses
Oh, cool.
all over the world. And they would pay him $30,000 to take photos of a golf course.
Yeah, there's niches out there. There's niches of photography that you can make a really good living. One of the things that my wife and I do in the off season, because it's difficult to make a living doing photography in the winter a lot of times. There's not a lot of things going on, but we do school and sports photography in the winter. So we do gymnastics studios, dance studios, cheerleading studios, and it's quite a lucrative venture if you're good at it and you're able to acquire those contracts. My wife and I have one particular contract that we do of a dance studio, and that one particular contract provides about 1/3 of our annual income. You had another question?
Well, I was gonna say, there's a big market for livestock and pet shows and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I did mention at one point in there that although portraits, I said, are taking pictures of people in their natural state, I suppose you get away with saying that animals are a type of portraiture. Taking a picture of a puppy dog, looking at the camera with his head tilted and his tongue sticking out, is invoking emotion from the animal. Capturing, a happy dog is portraiture. And but yeah, equestrian photography is a huge thing. Taking pictures of horses, and yeah, there's since photography has become so inundated with providers, and it's become so saturated as a market. It's good to find different things that are maybe untapped niches that you can capitalize on, and it's especially great if it's something that's interesting to you. So if you love horses, why wouldn't you become proficient at taking pictures of horses and become the premier Minnesota equestrian photographer or livestock or whatever? So, yeah.
How long does it take you to edit your wedding pictures?
That's a great question. I'm a horrible person, well, maybe not a horrible person to ask that, but my response is probably going to be different than a lot of people. I have a really good friend who can edit a whole wedding in a day, in a couple hours. He uses a lot of batch processing. What I mean by that is he might take 15 images that are all shot in a row and apply the same settings to all 15 of those images. I am very picky and a perfectionist, maybe to a fault. I take a lot of time from the process. So like a wedding, I'll probably shoot anywhere from typically around 4,000 to 4,500 photos total for a wedding. And my wife, I task her with the job of culling. Does everybody know what culling is? Going through and picking out the best pictures. One little tip as a side note to that for culling, one of the things that changed my life and my wife's life, when we used to go through and pick out the bad pictures. So if you go through your photos, and if you use Lightroom, it's X to black flag it, meaning I don't want that picture, or P puts a little white flag on it and makes that a picture that you pick. If you go through your whole session and are only picking out the bad ones, it's two things. It's mentally bad for you because all you're doing is looking at your worst work. You're looking for your worst work. And also, you're typically going to end up with a lot more pictures at the end because you're just going to be less picky, I think. But instead, a photographer that I worked with and some tutorials that I've taken always says, only go through and pick the keepers, right? And also another trick is to do your culling backwards. So start from the end of the shoot and go backwards, because your pictures are always, so like think of it, if I'm taking a picture of somebody and I take 10 pictures, why didn't I stop after 5? Because I wanted to get more and they were getting better, right? So typically your best pictures are going to be at the end. So of every section. So if you call backwards, you're going to go through, pick. Oh, I love that picture. Pick. And then you're going to keep going. You're going to be like, no. Okay. And then you get to the next section. Oh yeah, pick. And that way you're speeding up the process quite a bit by going backwards and choosing the good ones. Don't call by picking the bad ones. Sorry, I digressed there a little bit. What did I start out by? How long? Thank you. Once my wife calls a wedding and I go through and I start editing, I don't know, 12 to 14 hours maybe, 10, 12, 14 hours, somewhere in there. Every wedding's a little different too. Some are more challenging than others. Some are easier. Some weddings, the lighting was just perfect on that day and everybody was really photogenic. And I could fly through them. I build my own presets that I use, and I use a little controller. It's called a loop deck. It's like the size of a keyboard, and I set up macros on it. So there's like all these buttons on it to control exposure and contrast and that sort of thing, and I can use that and fly through really fast. So I get to a picture, I hit a hotkey, it applies a filter, I adjust exposure, adjust contrast, bring my highlights down, shadows, and then I hit next. And if it's a picture that's in the same setting, it's just another pose, I'll apply the settings from the previous picture to that picture and then tweak what I need to. And then I'll go to the next picture and apply the settings and tweak them. So I'm pretty quick, but I am a perfectionist and I do take a lot of time. I also probably do a lot more like Photoshop editing than typical photographers do, like skin softening and removing a stop sign coming out of someone's head or that sort of stuff, which I don't do for every image, but if I go through and I look at it and if it catches my eye, I think, oh, that could catch somebody else's eye, so I'm gonna remove that. So, but yeah, I would say overall, a whole wedding from beginning to end, probably 16 hours maybe, the whole process.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah. One last one.